Welcome back to a brand new episode of B&B Movie Reviews. This week, we're diving into the deep blue sea with the Megalodon, discovering an alien scarab, take a ride with Neil Blomkamp's latest, and balance the scales with Denzel. Stay right there. B&B is up next.
Two vacationers try to paddle their way away from a giant megalodon in the creature feature sequel, Meg 2: The Trench. Bryan,
Yes.
Bryan, that clip.
That clip.
That's all you need.
You know
the
what?
Meg eating some things.
Dude, I tell you, if the movie was more of that, I may have had more fun with this movie. But the problem is that comes so late in the film, and the first hour that we have to take to get to this.
I hear you.
Yes.
I do think it's two films in one.
Oh, yeah, it is.
And depending on what you think you want from the Meg 2: The Trench, one of those films might work for you more than the other. The last third of the movie is really the silly, let's eat all the people movie. There's also a giant octopus.
Yeah.
And the first hour is actually a pretty serious sea exploration movie. Jason Statham underwater trying to figure out what's going on below that heat barrier. I don't understand the science. I don't think they understand the science. But even that story, which was a little like Deep Star 6, I was having a good time with it. I really liked the film.
Yeah,
I just did.
The problem with that first hour is, I think sometimes, and we talk about this in the past as far as selling us a movie that we're expecting to get when we walk into the theater. And a lot of times through the promotional materials, we're seeing these megalodons, coming towards the beach and attacking all these people, seeing the giant octopus bring a helicopter down and all these things.
All those things happen in this movie, Bryan.
And they do, but it's like when the movie starts, it's like, okay, I understand we need setup, and I'm okay with setup, but for this kind of schlocky B movie, which is not saying that in a bad way, I kind of was expecting that, and then it's like we get
I love the opening where you see where we're back in prehistoric times, megalodon times, and we see one tiny animal eat a larger animal, eat a larger, and it's just
we're seeing the food chain,
the food chain happening. The T-Rex eats the little lizard guy, and then the shark comes out and eats the T-Rex. That's the spirit that you want through the whole thing, probably. And we don't get that. But I have to say, the corporate espionage stuff, I still rather enjoyed.
Okay.
And I liked the intensity of that undersea floor sequence where they're in suits and there's weird creatures that aren't Megs, they're these other lizard guys, swimming around them and picking them off one by one. What's most interesting about Meg 2: The Trench is that it's directed by Ben Wheatley.
Yes, that's what I wanted to bring up.
A Field of England, High Rise, Free Fire, that Rebecca remake on Netflix.
Yeah.
What is he doing directing the Meg 2?
That's what that was my biggest question. I wanted to bring that up, Ben Wheatley, because when you hear about some of these very niche indie directors that are doing kind of these big budget studio movies, it's appealing when you hear okay, what are they going to bring to something like this? And I could see him bringing a lot of his kind of that B movie flair, especially with a movie he did Free Fire too, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of tonally, it kind of has some of a little bit of that in it from what I can see.
And I think there are some interesting camera choices in this movie that remind me of Ben Wheatley. He puts the camera inside the mouth of the megalodon, and you're seeing people being digested, being swallowed.
I did like that.
I mean, I wanted more of that, more Ben Wheatley flourishes. And I think if Ben Wheatley could have really let loose on this film, there's a lot of cooks in this kitchen.
It is.
And he was probably held back. And I wish he had been let loose and we would have had just more of that Wheatliness.
I think if he would have let loose about an hour earlier into the movie instead of like the last 30 minutes, I would have enjoyed this immensely more. But what's your rating for this one?
You know, we're the B&B show. We
Yes.
give something a B+ if we like it, a B- if we don't. It's definitely a B+. I will watch it again. I would recommend seeing it in a theater.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I didn't have that same theater experience that you wanted. That,
I was alone,
that you
Bryan.
had. Yeah, my theater was pretty empty.
Quiet.
Yeah, it was pretty quiet. But yeah, I think I do enjoy that third act. I just wish we would have had more of that earlier because unfortunately for me, that first hour just did not work for me at all. So unfortunately, I'm gonna go B-.
Sad.
I know. I'm sorry, man. But yeah, so those are our ratings for the Meg 2, The Trench. We split on that one, but don't go anywhere because when we come back, we are going to take a look at DC's latest, Blue Beetle. Stay right there.
Every minute counts in a poison emergency. That's why Poison Help is standing by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in over 100 languages. Save Poison Help as a contact in your phone today. Call your local Poison Center at 1-800-222-1222.
Now! Hi.
Dude, no worries. Just take your time.
Thanks, Jenny. You gotta force it to come out. What do you... Hi. You're a genius.
What? I know. What'd I say?
You said this thing isn't gonna protect me, right? It's not gonna let me die?
No, I mean, we die.
All right, let's see if it
I
works.
wouldn't test it.
No, wait a minute. Let me know.
Jaime Reyes tries to summon the Blue Beetle, but as his family faces imminent danger, Jaime must go to extreme measures to force the scarab to come out. Brad, so DC, you know, it's been a shaky road for the last couple of years for DC, especially after the announcement of a new universe coming, and you
the
have
bomb of Flash.
Yeah, you had these Slater movies coming out, and then Blue Beetle being the kind of like the new kid on the block, and you know, we've heard a lot about him possibly continuing on in the new universe. I was always interested in seeing Blue Beetle because I was interested in seeing, you know, kind of like a smaller tier character where you can kind of like shrink a little bit of the world and kind of tell more of a personal story. For me, it's very familiar, but it works. For me, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I think the family dynamic worked. Yes, it's an origin story that we've seen before, but I think there's a charm to this movie that I really enjoyed. What were some of the thoughts you had on this one?
Yeah, I liked it. I don't know if I loved it. I don't even know if I liked it as much as you, but I think what the film does well and what it injects into the superhero story is the entire family around Jaime. You know, you have Jaime discovering his powers and getting the scarab, and like all that stuff is very Iron Man-y, and you know, it's solid. But it's the family unit around him, the supporting cast, that elevates the movie above, you know, a mid-tier superhero film.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I kind of responded to because, I mean, again, like we said, this is very familiar and a lot of people kind of ding it for not being original, but I like the cultural specificity of it because I think the specificity of that makes this story, I think, a little bit different than something that we've seen before, even though it is very familiar to some of the same tropes that we've seen in origin movies in this genre beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing superhero films on the regular basis for, what, almost 30 years at this point? 25 easily, right? You know, Spider-Man, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was 20 years ago. X-Men was longer. So I think we are now well-versed in the aesthetic of superhero origin stories. And so when you get an origin story, it's a little played out. And but what that gives you is the opportunity to shade it in new ways, right? To add new flavors. And I think Blue Beetle absolutely does do that. And also, you know, it delivers on the other things. You know, it's not that it's a weak version of an origin story. No, it's a good version of an origin story.
Yeah.
The superhero action is good when he gets to play around with the Scarab suit. I mean, it's fun. The stuff that this suit can do is a little bit different than what the Iron Man suit can do. It's a little bit Iron Man, it's a little bit Venom.
Yeah.
It's rad looking.
Yeah. I think some of the parts of the movie that didn't work for me overall was probably well, I ain't gonna say probably, it was the villain. I mean, Susan Sarandon to me just felt like a bad choice. It felt like she was.
I don't know if she was a bad choice. I think she actually did good for what she was given. I just don't think she was given much. It's a pretty weak character.
What was the other?
Carapax is like her henchman.
Yeah.
And I also liked the backstory that they gave Carapax.
That I do.
And there was a tremendous amount of empathy that this script served him. I then think it does a tremendous disservice with what happens to Carapax at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
I won't spoil it here, but I was a little uncomfortable with how they resolved Carapax's story, and then ultimately the way that they dealt with Susan Sarandon's character, Mrs. Cord, was not satisfying.
Yeah, I think with Carapax's story, I liked the reveal that we got into his backstory. Part of me wishes that it would have came a little sooner into the story.
Yes.
So that we could have had, because there's something interesting that's being told with the corporate side of what. Is it Court Industries or? There's an interesting story that's being told from that side of it, as far as like how that relates to what happened to Carapax in his past. And I think there's something that could have been explored there a little bit more.
I actually like the Blue Beetle that they decided to adapt, the Jaime Reyes character. I mean, Jaime is actually the third character to take on the Blue Beetle mantle. There are so many different versions of the Blue Beetle story that they could have told, but I like that they start with Jaime and they hint at this vast mythology. Now, do they succeed in really selling that vast mythology? They get close.
Okay.
And you know, we get an end credit sequence that's supposed to be like a dun dun, and I think it's a dun dun for the people that have a better understanding of the Cord mythology, the Blue Beetle mythology.
But the people that don't, you know, it's kind of like okay, what is this? Where is this going to actually lead to?
But I don't mind leaving an audience with a
Same.
You know, the way that when Thanos stood up at the end of Avengers, everyone's like, well, who's this purple chin guy?
Dude, that was the same thing with Avengers, because I wasn't well versed in the Thanos, and now the whole world knows who Thanos is. So. And
when you get done with Blue Beetle, you're definitely left with the sense of, well, I want more.
Absolutely.
I'm ready for a Blue Beetle 2.
Yeah.
Now, the film didn't do tremendous at the box office, but I think it will do well on home video. Home video. How old am I? Ancient. Grandpa says home video. I think it will do well at home, and I think it could build in the same fashion that Into the Spider-Verse built into Across the Spider-Verse.
I think,
if they allow it.
Yeah, I think this could do the same. What's your rating for this?
I give it a B+. I had a really good time at the movies. I would recommend it to anybody who likes superhero films. It's one of the better efforts out there.
Yeah, I agree. It's a B+ for me. I think the emotional journey that the character goes on with the family and some of those impactful moments as we get into the third act, I think really work well. So
George Lopez.
So good.
Yeah,
he's good. I mean, all the actors are great in this movie. So yeah, B+ for me. So yeah, those are our thoughts on Blue Beetle. B+ from me and Brad. So when we return, Neil Blomkamp, you remember him from District 9. He has a new movie out. Is it kind of similar to what he's done in the past? We'll let you know. Stay right there.
After rent and power, I can get groceries. It's sad to say food comes last. Anna from Texas. No one should have to worry where their next meal will come from. Together, we can end hunger. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
I need you to be faster than this. Don't think, just react. You're gonna be hot in the car, you're gonna be tired. Focus!
Jack thinks we just suck.
Grabbed a bunch of cones back there, extra points. And I will decide who is eliminated.
I'm coming in.
Close that gap! Close that gap!
Jesus Christ.
David Harbour takes the new recruits through a rigorous training to take them from behind the controller into the reality of the dangers behind the wheel in the latest and surprising film from Neil Blomkamp. Brad, all right, so let's start there. Neil Blomkamp, we know him from, what, District 9, Elysium, Chappie, your favorite, Demonic.
Yep.
So he's back doing something that not necessarily is in his wheelhouse, but he succeeds at this, in my opinion.
I love Neil Blomkamp.
Yeah.
I'm a great defender of his early work. I mean, obviously, most people like District 9. Elysium, I think, is super solid.
Yeah.
And I love Chappie.
I'm with you on that one.
Thank goodness.
Yes.
There's two of us. And my wife, Lisa.
Yes.
I have been waiting for Neil Blomkamp to really go off. You know, he was supposed to do an Alien film. He was supposed to do a RoboCop movie. And both of those, I was like, oh, man, he's so good for that. I hope that happens. And neither of them happened.
I know.
I have no nostalgia for, what is this, Gran Turismo?
Yes.
It's a video game simulator?
A simulation,
right.
Brad.
It's a car simulator. Okay. And then Nissan, this is a car company, I'm told? Okay.
Yes.
Or is it Nissan? I have no nostalgia for any of these things. I don't care about racing at all. Neil Blomkamp sells everything. I think the way that he shoots these races is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It reminded me of Tony Scott in Days of Thunder. Like, it doesn't have the color of Days of Thunder. I wish there actually was a little more color to the cinematography.
It feels like, even with the trailers, it felt a little flat, which is why it was kind of like I wasn't really looking forward to this too much.
It doesn't look like a Neil Blomkamp movie.
And yeah, you're right. It doesn't. But I mean, once you kind of get into the story and you also see what he does with the races within the context of the movie, a lot of that stuff works, even though the cinematography may not look as aesthetically pleasing as we would like for it to look.
And initially, I was not interested in any of the relationship dynamics that were proposed, but all the actors sell those dynamics, right? So you're like, this is a little cliche. We've seen these kinds of antagonistic back and forths before, but everyone involved just nails it.
Dude, Jamin Hansu, his father, Archie Madekwe.
I was crying at the end. That final scene with those two.
Oh, goodness. And then I think the standout or the MVP it might be David Harbour.
He's great.
I mean, David Harbour, I mean, I don't want to say it's an understated performance because it's a character that we've seen throughout a lot of sports movies.
Yes.
I mean, he's basically the Mickey in the Rocky franchise.
Yes.
But the relationship that he has with Archie Madekwe's character, Yan, I think that's his name.
Yeah.
The relationship that they build together throughout the course of this, where he starts off with Orlando Bloom's character, where he's not on board with this, but he slowly starts to kind of get more involved and more engaged.
To the sim drivers, where he's like, "Look, I'm here to prove that you cannot do this."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's on them to change his mind, which of course they do.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But like, you hear the idea of, you take the best simulated sim drivers.
Yeah.
What's the phrase? Sim drivers in the world.
Something like that.
And then you put these kids behind an actual Formula One. Like, that's absurd.
Yeah.
They're going to win Le Mans? That's ridiculous. And then it's based on a true story? What? I'm on Wikipedia after watching this film going like, this happened?
Yeah, but it's a wild story. And just the simple fact that Nissan would actually put this out there to these Gran Turismo video gamers, simulators. I think that's the phrase for it.
That's what we're saying.
But the fact that Nissan would actually put this contest out there, and then you have somebody who is actually still racing to this day.
It's bonkers.
It's a wild story.
The movie is one giant commercial. All right, it is such a commercial for Sony. When David Harbour's like unwrapping his gift. That's an iPhone. Anyone would get you're getting an iPhone in reality, but no, this guy's going to get a little tiny little Sony disc player. And I feel a little weird about the amount of times you see the word Sony throughout this whole thing.
Yeah.
That being said, man, I was riveted.
But you know how I am with music. So I don't, again, I'm not going to give too much away, but they used that musical cue, Moby from at the end of Heat.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, they used the Heat music.
Yeah,
I was sometimes I was like, when I hear, like, when they take music from another movie, I'm like, oh, man, but this worked?
You know who's going to be the biggest fan of Gran Turismo is Kenny G.
No, oh,
Kenny
goodness.
G and Enya. It's also an ad for their great work.
It is. What's your rating for this one?
I had a blast with it. It's definitely a B+.
Same here. B+. Had so much fun with this movie. So yeah, B+ for both of us. That rhymes. All right. So when we return, we revisit Robert McCall in Equalizer 3. Stay right there.
Going to cheerleading camp next to the abandoned insane asylum, it's like throwing good blood away.
50% of Americans like watching blood get spilled in horror movies, but only 3% donate it.
Now that's scary.
If you're buzzed and doing this to make yourself feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive.
Your man to my left finger on the trigger, but he's a foot too close, which renders your man to my right dead already. He just doesn't know it yet. I feel sorry for his family. 9 seconds. That's what you have to decide your fate. 9 seconds.
Robert McCall assesses the room and gives his condolences to the man he's about to kill in the latest and final installment in the Equalizer trilogy, Bryan.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
All right.
I had no interest in a Meg sequel, loved the Meg sequel. I had no interest in a Gran Turismo game, loved the Gran Turismo movie. I had no interest in an Equalizer sequel. I don't even think I saw the second one. Loved Equalizer 3.
3 for 3. There we go.
Yes.
3 for 3 for the Equalizer 3. I rewatched the first 2 movies coming into the third movie, and I really like this franchise. Antoine Fuqua, this is his 4th or 5th time working with
at least
Denzel.
4.
At least 4. So they have a great shorthand, a working relationship together, and you could definitely see that they enjoy working together. And I think they've done well with what they've done with the Equalizer trilogy. So, and Antoine Fuqua has been hit or miss throughout his whole career.
He's on a run, I say, right now.
He is.
Right, coming off of Emancipation, doing Equalizer 3. Both of these films are also shot by Robert Richardson, and I think that is a tremendous help to the direction,
Didn't know he shot this one too.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. It's funny though, because this movie, I don't necessarily know if I enjoyed my experience watching it in the theater, but since I've seen it, I've been thinking about this movie more and more, and it's kind of been growing on me a little bit more. But it's very different from the previous 2 movies. And I feel like this movie kind of takes its time because they do something.
Oh, yeah, it's slow.
It's slow. And they do something in the beginning of the film that kind of takes, and I don't want to give too much away, but it kind of takes Robert McCall out of...
And that's the best thing that happens, in my opinion.
Okay.
So that's the clip we saw, that's the opening sequence where he just demolishes everybody in this room. And the thing about the Equalizer films, and this is based on memory because I don't really remember much about Equalizer 1, but they are violent.
Yeah.
They are brutal in their violence. They are gratuitous. My father would hate these films. And, he just destroys these people once he goes off after he's, condescended them for a little bit, and then he just demolishes them. But he's wounded in the beginning of this movie, and he's taken off the board, right? And he has to recuperate in this small Italian village off the Amalfi Coast, which is gorgeous.
Beautiful.
And what you're suddenly watching is a Western, about the old gunslinger. He's a little bit past his prime, but he still has all the skills. And he's falling in love with the town. He's falling in love with the fishmonger. He's falling in love with the waitress. He's falling in love with the cop. He's falling in love with the doctor. And the movie takes all this time to show you the geography of the town. And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm going, there's going to be a massive gun battle at the end of this movie. It's going to go full Three Amigos. And we're going to see the bad guys rush this town, and the town's going to come to the rescue of Robert McCall. And I'm not going to spoil the ending, but it doesn't necessarily do that, and I was deeply disappointed.
It's interesting because I didn't even pick up on the Western kind of metaphor, allegory that is there in the beginning of him going to this town. And I like that. Now that you put it that way, it does feel that way. And he is kind of, and I got that sense of he's falling in love with this town, and this is where he wants to settle down.
Denzel is so good. Denzel doesn't have to say much, dude, but you get a whole life in a look.
In a look, and that's the brilliance of Denzel Washington in everything that he does, specifically as this character in these movies. He's done it in the previous 2 movies, but in this one, he also does it as well. And when he has these confrontations with the villains, when Denzel starts talking that talk, it's like you're in it.
And then he delivers, right? Like he gets wounded in the beginning, but you never fear for him ever again, right? No. Now, if I had a big issue with this movie, it's the B plot. It's the Dakota Fanning story, the CIA story. I love seeing Dakota Fanning and Denzel like reunite after Man on Fire.
Me too.
But her story is so boring.
You know, I want to tread lightly because of the reveal about who she is. And
I don't even understand that reveal. I saw that photograph at the end of the movie, and I was like, what's he doing
Because
here?
you haven't seen the second one, right?
No, I have not. No,
okay,
no,
okay. Because I think that was an aspect that was missing from this movie were 2 characters that were in the first and the second movie. And I was watching this movie, and it felt like she was kind of being the replacement for those characters that were in the other.
Not interesting.
But I think that relationship that Robert McCall has with those characters in the other 2 movies works very well. And to me, I felt like that was an aspect that was missing that they were trying to do with Dakota Fanning, even though I do like their chemistry together, and it is great to see them together after Man on Fire. Man on Fire, they're so good together.
Yeah, and I like Dakota Fanning. I really do. And she hasn't been doing a ton of movies recently.
No, she hasn't.
So seeing her here, I was like, oh yeah, we need more Dakota Fanning.
Yeah, we'd love to see her again.
Yeah.
I think another aspect of this that really kind of fell flat to me was the villains. Again, you haven't seen the second movie, but you've seen the first one.
I've seen the first one.
Yeah, and the first one deals more with the Russian mob, but I just didn't feel the threat from the villains in this one.
But that's kind of what I liked about it, because he was so confident in his execution. You know, McCall, he is a force of nature, right? Or he's almost a divine force. This town needed him.
They did.
He shows up, and he gives them their freedom back. And so I wasn't really worried or even interested in the tension about will he or won't he save the day here.
You're right, because it does feel like the story falls more on Robert McCall and this town, as opposed to it being more about Robert McCall versus, you know, this Italian mafia.
Yeah, and the town getting its spine back, right?
Exactly.
And so I will say, like, I do think when you get to the end, and we go nighttime, and we go to a mansion, and all the violence is in this mansion.
Yeah.
I was disappointed because, again, the geography of the town was so well established.
Yeah.
Those steps, I wanted a fight on those steps. I wanted Denzel throwing dudes right down that corridor.
John Wick 4 style.
Yes, yes.
You know, something I thought about too is like Denzel feels like he is a Jason Voorhees to the mafia.
Yes.
He's a slasher to and the movie the movie understands that and treats him like that to the mafia.
Yeah. And the way that the camera lingers on their mangled bodies after they've encountered.
It's a horror movie for the villains. Yeah, it's crazy. What's your score for this one?
Loved it. I need Equalizer 4, 5, and 6 now.
Oh, I don't know if we'll get that. B plus. B plus for me. I was teetering on a B minus or a high B minus, but I think this conversation that we had really shows me. I know. You won me over, man.
I did.
It really did kind of switch me over, especially now that I think more about that Western aspect to it. So yeah, I'll give it a B plus. So those are our thoughts on Equalizer 3. So let's go ahead and recap what we reviewed. on this episode. We go back to the Meg 2, The Trench. We split on that one. I give that a B-. Brad gives that a B+. Our next film is Blue Beetle. We both give that a B+. Then we have what was, oh goodness, I forgot. We have Gran Turismo is next. We give that a B+.
Obviously, we loved it.
Well, I know. And then we go to Equalizer 3. We give that one a B+. So, thank you for joining us on this latest episode of B&B Movie Reviews. Come be a part of the conversation. If you have questions, suggestions, feel free to email us at bnbmoviereviews@gmail.com. And with that, we will see you at the movies.
You were the grumpiest.